Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I'm get the privilege of introducing David Smith. It's a nice breather after the topic is a little bit of a breather after audits and bankruptcies. David Smith, he's a leader, is a leadership coach and consultant serving leaders and their teams to forge new levels of effectiveness and healthier cultures. He's an accomplished executive leader, entrepreneur from multiple startups in different industries, and had founding roles in the launch of 2 financial organizations, including one of Canada's 50 best managed companies. Dave has led major strategic initiatives that have sparked innovation, strong business growth, and healthy cultural transformations. He's also led and coached teams spread right across Canada for over 20 years. He's an accomplished speaker, facilitator, and writer with national and international experience. Please join me in welcoming David Smith.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. It is a delight to be here. And Denise mentioned an accomplished speaker. Well, one of those speakers that's learning to navigate in the virtual world. And I have to say, I've had probably half a dozen large engagements virtually in the last couple of years. Some of them were booked before things became virtual. And it's been wonderful, although I do miss B2B or P2P, person to person. I'd love to be in downtown Abbotsford today meeting with you all, but we've got Zoom, and that's our next best approach to it. Well, when I was asked to do the presentation, which I'm quite grateful for, I was expected to be talking about after COVID to a degree, what looking at through the lenses from a past tense perspective. And we really don't have that kind of luck. Unfortunately, we're still living with it. And I work out of Saskatoon, and we have probably a little more COVID and stats than other parts of the country as well. But today, the talk is about strategic stride. And a lot of people had it before. Many organizations have repositioned quite well during COVID, and then others, not so much. Everybody wants to know, though, what is next. So the next hour or so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some of my observations from talking to other people, some other smart people. I'm going to share some research, going to share some insights from my own practice, and hopefully give you some useful insight so that you can walk into that journey of the future and really regain the strategic stride that you have had in the past, or support the clients that you're working with. Now, my business, as you can see, our focus is on working with leaders, collaborating and guiding leaders, their teams and organizations. We have associates of coaches, consultants, facilitators, and regional connections, national connections, and beyond. And we spend a lot of time coaching and mentoring leaders. I've coached personally over 300 leaders. Well, and a lot of that experience, well, you might be asking what's that doing related to strategy? Well, I've got a lot of experience in strategy, a lot of training, and frankly, I've gotten to see strategy from all angles. And in the last number of years, last decade or so, working with leaders implementing strategy. COVID has brought a lot new, and it even brought some newness to our organization. We introduced a company called Virtual Leadership Matters about a year ago to help individuals work with their teams virtually. These are the types of organizations we work with: science, technology, professional services, education, post-secondary, and indigenous markets as well, and some global mining companies. And so I've had the pleasure of working a lot with the accounting profession. So I was delighted to have an opportunity to work with CPAs in British Columbia. I've worked a lot with CPAs in practice in support of team cohesion, and also in support of successioning partners. And I've worked with a lot of the next gen to support them in their journey, but also in many industries where CPAs pop up in very influential roles. And I'll tell you a secret. So out of my clients, some of my favorite ones are my accountants and engineers. Love to work with accountants and engineers. There's a sense of pragmatism that's really, really important. Okay, during the session, this is what we're going to do. We're talking about stride. So we're going to talk about some of the trends shaping the new normal and what that's likely to be. We'll talk a little bit about business life cycles and what's happened the last couple of years. We're going to talk about leadership in this in the new workforce, in this new environment, what that looks like. And there are some stark differences that are worth knowing. And also workspaces, what's happened, virtualness, what's going on, and the rapid changes that are underway. We'll share some information and some learnings in that regard. Okay. Now, from a workforce perspective, I hope there's not too much overlap with what Dr. Griffiths is going to provide tomorrow, but there may be some. And if it is, there's perhaps some use in the redundancy. So we're also going to wrap up in about 45 minutes or so with a number of your questions. And I would encourage you to populate the chat box with any questions you might have, and I'll work with you with them when we're done. Okay, and look forward to that. All right. So why are we talking about strategy? Why is it important? Well, strategy, much has happened in the pandemic, and strategy has changed. Vision, mission, values, and principles, which are usually a key part of strategy, they are vital personally and professionally. They organizationally, individually, they influence what we are, they influence our thinking. As individuals, we have thousands of thoughts every day, many of them subconscious as well. They influence our emotions positively or negatively. We see an awful lot of negative thinking. We see an awful lot of stress right now, and behaviors are influenced as a result of that. We all play a role in this individually and collectively. It's all important, and we need to be very much aware of what's going on. Purpose is vital. Behaviors, it's interesting. So we're hearing from a lot of clients, and otherwise, outcomes have been pretty solid during COVID. A lot of deliverables, but we've been very busy and perhaps too busy. Early on in COVID, right at the start of it, I heard this prophecy that we are going to experience 20 years of change in the next 2 years. Well, it's almost 2 years up, and I personally believe that we have seen a lot of that change, that 22 decades worth of change. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. I also believe that we don't realize it. There's been more change than we can absolutely comprehend. But I want to get your sense on that. With change in COVID, well, frankly, there have been a lot of strategy changes that have been necessary, very quick, necessary changes that lead to changes in structures in organization, which lead to changes in processes, changes in technology to support the processes, and ultimately changes in people. And there are a lot of demographic changes that are shaping the workforce, and some rather unsettling things that are emerging right now in terms of difficulty accessing people to work. These are the things that have gone on with COVID. And our roles as leaders within COVID is not necessarily to like it or support, but help ourselves understand we can manage change. Others can manage change, but people have a difficult time with uncertainty. And it's important for leaders within organizations to take the time that they can to help manage uncertainty, which is not an easy accomplishment in times of COVID. And ultimately, we do need to make sure we do what's practical, what's necessary, what's possible, and then suddenly we're doing things that are ultimately considered impossible by others. What I'm going to do right now is I want to test this hypothesis or this philosophy, prophecy, and see what you think. 20 years of change in the next 2 years. And I'm going to ask for a poll to start and get your views on what is it? What have you, how do you take that? What's your view on this? Please respond. Okay, I think we can probably end the poll right now. And can we share the results? Okay, so about half there. So perhaps we've seen a decade's worth of change in the last couple of years. 20% say, yeah, that's what we've experienced. And 10% of us say more has happened that we are unaware of. So perhaps we are the proverbial frog in the pot where the water's gotten warmer and warmer and warmer, and we just haven't jumped out before it's boiling. So interesting. Thank you. Appreciate that. Now we can stop sharing the poll. Okay. Now, COVID, from a strategic perspective, it's important that we think about how we gather data for what's going on. And some things can be surprising to us, much as COVID was from a transformation perspective. Regardless of the time we are in, it's important that we are continually being aware of our internal strengths and weaknesses, our external opportunities and threats, and the different trends that are forming in front of us that we need to be very much aware of. And we're going to talk about this, and essentially over the next, the remainder of our conversation is going to be a bit of a digital SWOT through our Zoom call, but also we're going to get some more input from you and share you with some suggestions on how to regain your strategic stride. I do yearn from back to the days when we were able to actually do some of these things together and put together notes and share ideas, but I found, frankly, the virtual technologies work very well and are incredibly efficient. So what we're going to talk about next now are the trends shaping the next normal, what we are going to see in the future. And from this, I'm going to look at words from a number of the whys, I would consider. And this is a group of different consultants that I've spent time with, have heard from, value their inputs, as do many of you as well. And I'm going to share some of the thoughts that they have that they've shared. Now, I fondly recall sitting in on a really intimate chat. It was a Zoom webinar early, I think it was March last year or 2020, with Patrick Lencioni. There was just me and him and about 4,000 other people from around the country, pardon me, around the globe. He was talking about really what was going on right now. And their suggestion was that there were going to be three categories of organizations and how the success was going to roll out. First of all, there was a large tranche that was going to be out of business. And I think that's what the session before me was talking about. Some of your clients that you're supporting very ably right now. And that has played true. There were then organizations that were going to be too busy to handle what was going on. Healthcare, transportation, retail, shifting, pivoting, the whole frontline services area in our organization, supply chains, all of those areas were too busy to remain healthy. And then there would be the idle group that's sitting back, not necessarily able to do a lot, but preparing for after, whenever the after comes, and preparing to thrive after. Three basic categories of organizations that we were going to be working with. And the strategic timelines, frankly, at that point had shrunken to almost nothing. People were thinking about day to day, week to week, month to month. Also, purpose was incredibly vital for people at that time, and perhaps even considered the new strategy that was salient at the time, as well as a real connection to people, health, safety, and productivity, ensuring that productivity was happening, even though people were working virtually. Scott Galloway wrote a terrific text, Post-Corona from Crisis to Opportunity. I'd encourage you to seek it out sometime. It is chock filled with insights for what we're likely to experience. And I'll share just a couple of them. And he has top 20 insights in one of his or in the document. but sectors will witness market consolidation around innovators and market gains with solid balance sheets, high value assets, cheap debt, and low fixed costs. Firms like Costco, Honeywell, Johnson & Johnson will have 11 billion, 15 billion, and nearly 20 billion respectively in their bank accounts. They will have the pick of assets, customers, when weaker competition shuts down. Tesla's valuation exceeds Toyota, Daimler, Volkswagen, and Honda combined, even though it will manufacture only 400,000 cars compared to 26 million cars manufactured by the other four in 2020. 82% of corporate leaders will allow partial remote working. 47% intend to offer full-time remote working in their organizations. The brand age where companies sell mass-produced products for high margins, creating emotional associations through advertising, has ended. It's going to be powered by online discoverability. Facebook and Google will account for 61% of the digital ad market in 2021. On and on. Really significant changes. I'd encourage you to have a look at those. Right now, I'd like to get a sense of where you are, what you're experiencing in your organization and those that you serve in terms of strategic timelines. And I'm going to ask for a poll to be shared on that. See what your timelines have emerged to be, thinking outwardly. Okay. All right, why don't we end the poll? So it looks like about 75%, based upon my view here, are seeing between monthly and annually. If we flip back a couple of years, most strategic plans were looking at a time horizon of 3 to 5 years, although in tech industry or others, strategic timelines were significantly shorter. So they are, most of them are a year or less. That's where, that's what the horizon has become in your area. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on. Now I want to talk about McKinsey. Early on in COVID, I was fortunate. I was invited into a group of their strategy area and had many webinars with a lot of their consultants from around the globe to hear what they were learning. And they shared at the time 8 forces that they felt were going to be impacting the next norm, and they've continued to track that. And I'd like to share some of these because I suspect you're experiencing now, or the clients that you're serving are as well. The first one is in the area of digitization and innovation. The rate has increased significantly. There's flourishing markets in artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, and augmented reality, and we're going to see an example of that in a minute. Biotech is also, thank goodness, the vaccine side of it has also flourished. Payment systems, retail industry restructuring, and so much more. Even space tourism and private space has changed, and Captain Kirk has returned to space in the last few years. It was interesting to note in the US, the number of patents has doubled from the level of patents in 2019. So there's a tremendous amount of innovation underway. As well, there's a view that there is going to be an increase in government action and engagement. Government is going to become more active in ownership. They're going to be paying, and they're going to be lenders of last resort in significantly more material ways. This is going to see an increase, and this is a global forecast, increase in the size of government, significant policy changes, and certainly a more progressive tone in all of that is done. So these are significant things that are changing from a governance perspective. From a medical perspective or healthcare, there's a revolution that's been underway. The last couple of years, about $180 billion was spent on vaccine research. To compare it to something else that's current, Zika, when that was prominent a few years ago, about $1 billion was spent on research for that particular area. So significant investment in the biotech side here. Recommitment and reinvention is something that's going to be familiar, seen all across the globe. It's going to lead to increase in costs and the desire to do the bending of the curve. I personally have been involved in healthcare governance at the provincial level, and I know that the intention to bend the curve is always there. With costs going up, it's still going to be a practical reality, so it's likely there is going to be more private health emerge. Because right now, 50% of provincial budgets are being allocated to healthcare costs. Features like telehealth and other things that have been interesting adaptations are probably going to carry on in the future. A new logo. The trend here is attached to dealing with balance between social and economic goals in countries. And there's going to be more acknowledgement of wealth disparity and the power associated with it. And big tech is certainly being focused on that. Facebook, which is now Meta, they've been the subject of a lot of controversy around the globe. And there's likely to be significantly amped up momentum in that particular area, as well in the area of green. And a recovery that is more focused on green everything. COP26 is on right now, lots of conversation. Some of you may be following that. It's really critical. It's important. Mark Carney characterized what's actually happening in all this is that we're going to see 50 shades of green in policy and in business as we start to move forward. And it's vital. It's also vital to know that it was forecasted that there was about $3.5 trillion worth of energy infrastructure change to be expended every year in the coming years on the globe to make sure that we are keeping up with the changes that are necessary. Government subsidies are going to be focused predominantly on green projects, and there is questions about the level of the level of support that business is going to have for this march towards the green recovery. Next is political instability. There's really a shift. Sorry, pardon me. I skipped right over cities. The redefining of work and the role of cities. What does that mean? Where are people going to work? Where people are migrating away? What does that look like? How much? At least 20% of the future workforce is likely to be working remotely. Many of them are in expensive real estate. What does this mean for commercial real estate, downtowns? What is their role? Funding for municipalities. Those are all areas that are subject to wonderment in the future. Then the whole area of shifting geopolitical flows and supply chains. There's poverty, there's food instability in the world, political conflict. There was a coup last week, I believe, in Sudan. We seem to see them on a regular basis. There are shortages, chips, microchips, autos, Christmas presents we're hearing might be in short supply this year. Lots of changes. Business travel has changed significantly, and as has leisure travel, but it's expected that that's going to rebound in the future. And the relationships between US and China continue to be fluid and always a challenge. So there's lots to be seen on the horizon there. And finally, this continued drive to towards efficiency and ensuring that we are resilient. There are higher levels of efficiency and effectiveness expected, potentially shorter work weeks, which we're seeing as a new trend as well. Not all people will be resilient, as we're going to see in a few minutes. We need to very much be aware of that. Leadership is changing and there are different needs on leadership, and we need to determine what they are. Okay, poll. I want to get a sense from your turf, which of these particular trends might be having the biggest impact. Take a moment. Okay, just about everybody's in. Why don't we end the poll and post it? Okay, so digital innovation and government involvement are the two key players in your particular ecosystem. Okay, and very interesting. All right. All of them will be material players globally, all of them playing a factor, but those are the two key ones to focus on from your perspective. Thank you. I'd appreciate hearing some of your comments about that in the chat box, and how these are actually playing out for you and your clients that you're working with. Let's move now to business life cycles. As we've gone through the trauma of COVID, all the differences, all the stressors that are related to it, businesses have had that manifest in different ways in terms of their business life cycles. When we start to look at organizations and products, they have a natural evolutionary flow from cradle to grave. COVID has had a profound impact on many organizations and how they've moved through their life cycle. It sped up the life cycle for a lot of organizations, a lot of startups, some enhanced growth, but also the decline certain organizations that have found themselves in that sped that up really significantly. As well, from a merger and acquisition perspective, there are well, it's been a virtual tidal wave, to quote KPMG manager I spoke with a while ago. They were saying that in June of 2021, they reported doing more deals in the last 6 months than they had done in the last 5 years. Significant change in private companies, people stepping away. Not necessarily because of decline, but perhaps because they've matured growth, or they're at enterprise level and they really just wanted to step away and take advantage of their equity positions. Startups, now one of the changes that is pretty obvious is they really have to move to full competency in a hurry. They've got to pivot, they've got to be quick, they've got to be big or go home. And there is a massive wealth transitioning happening in the family business or business family area. Founders are leaving. They want to move to the next gen, and they're hoping for successful transitions. Right now, I'm working with 5 different organizations where the founders have said it's enough. The last couple of years has been trying. So we are going to step away and hasten that transition. Okay. Now, whatever models you use from a strategic thinking perspective, well, they might be challenged. I like this one from Harvard that I learned a few years ago there. Very simple, very basic. Talked about from a strategic thinking perspective, think about what you want, your outcome. What do you want to achieve and why? Get the purpose behind it. and get a really good future state view. That might be hard with COVID, might be a little difficult. Then try to measure progress, try to figure out knowing what success will look like, getting balanced scorecards, ways to measure that. That might be a little bit challenging, or might be daunting right now. It could be really, really scary, or too scary, or it might be just too simple. I don't know. That those are dreamy. Those are different options. From an input perspective, does it make sense? Your current state assessment is also harder to do, and figuring out how to put together the plan to do all of these things with all of these moving parts. My suggestion from a strategic thinking perspective is that although there are flaws in different types of thinking and strategic models that you may be using, simple is still probably the best. I'd still recommend it, but I'd encourage you to use whatever you have, knowing that there could be weaknesses or challenges in the current environment that we are working within. All right, leadership, the human capital part of the this new workforce, this new environment. I'd like to spend a few minutes on that. The basic building blocks in working and leading are putting together good teams. You have to have teams. There has to be a common vision, your eye on some goals and objectives. That is important. Structure, operating processes, routines, technology, that's all in place. And then the climate within which they work, communications and relationships. The purpose is the foundation. Structure and climate are the structure that you need to put into place for the organization and your teams to be successful. During COVID, there hasn't necessarily been a major change in purpose. Little or no difference, although it's been important. From a structure perspective, lots of operating processes have changed, lots of technology. The digital world has helped us in many, many different ways. And also role definition needed to be clarified. What the biggest difference in COVID impacting the future is the climate, and the virtual team climate has changed very significantly from the from face-to-face teams. Very significant changes. One of the tools that I've found quite useful in working with teams is a process to help them think about purpose and how important it is right now when people are potentially stepping through safety issues, concerns, wondering about their own lives. They might be thinking about their purpose. It's helpful that purpose clarity be determined for them, well, their teams, their organization, and the time taken to make sure that it is communicated to the various stakeholders, knowing that they have minimal expectations, but they also might have a desire to go the extra mile or beyond, and be able to articulate what that looks like. Really good working document that's part of your handout to help people think through purpose, which has been called the new strategy. During COVID, there are a lot of circumstances where people's purpose are not necessarily being fulfilled in the workforce. And there's a significant churn or turnover that is a factor. And we need to be very much aware of this. Microsoft, in their trends report, their workplace trends reports, suggested that 40% of their global workforce was thinking about quitting this year. 46% planned major career shifts. So almost half. A professor, Anthony Klotz from Texas A&M University, said that we're going to see more lost work, or more workers quitting their jobs than in the last 20 years right now. So there's a lot going on. And why? Well, there are still lingering fears about COVID. It's not gone away. We are in fourth wave, and in Saskatchewan, and I guess in Alberta, we've got it more intensely in other parts of the world. And there's a fear around that. Government income support payments, benefits, allowing job seekers, they've been able to delay their return to work. And I'm sure you've worked with many clients to support them on that. That's stopped, or it's morphing right now, and it's likely to bring back some employees. Those caring for children or elderly perhaps have been unable to access some of the previous resources that they've used to provide that type of care, and they're choosing to do it themselves now. There are also people who have lost their jobs, and they may not have the skills required for other jobs and are going to have, or they lack previous childcare and elder care resources, reasons why they're not stepping back into the workforce. There are some that perhaps have already found jobs in different industries and are contributing to the Great Resignation and the proliferation of that. And many close to retirement perhaps have recalibrated their needs and chosen to spend more time with family and retirement, or limit their availability. They may well have read this book that I read early on in COVID. It's about essentialism. It's a read by Greg McEwen on really what's important in your life. And a lot of people have taken that opportunity to think strategically about themselves. So their strategic strides are in directions that are more intentional for them. Now, employers are making some mistakes, according to McKinsey. And this is a presenter's nightmare and a nightmare for somebody looking at it as well. Big charts, lots of words. What I'm going to tell you, this is in the blue here, are based on McKinsey research, what employees really value from their employees. They want to be valued. They want to be valued by their manager. They want to belong, potential for advancement. They want to have good teammates, etc. What employers are viewing is important to employees is they're concerned about money. They're looking for a better job. Their flight risks. They're worried about safety, development opportunities, etc. The employees are focusing more on relational elements as their reason to be in the workforce, and employers in general are thinking more about transactional factors that are not as valued by employees. Fascinating research, something that we need to be aware of. We want to know what our employees really, really want so we can do the best we can to stop that Great Resignation in our own organizations. As well, McKinsey has been tracking mental health throughout COVID. This particular line is an amalgam of productivity, staff or employee engagement, satisfaction. Early days before COVID, ticking along at this level, COVID hits, it drops. Then after the first wave of COVID, there's a lot of camaraderie built, a lot of productivity, and things changed significantly as we were all fighting a common foe. And then the realization that there were going to be subsequent waves and a newness wasn't there, a sustainable newness, led to a drop. And unchecked, it is said that we're working, ourselves and others that we're working with are going to be navigating through a couple years of grief that is left from disillusionment and things that have not happened. And this may well be there in your work teams. Now, from a leadership perspective, it is vital to think about our styles. And a predominant style in the past has been the compliance control trap, where we used our position and authority, and we're there to tell people what to do, how to do it, make decisions, use and make sure there's results, and monitor and use our knowledge. We can do this when we can observe, but we cannot do that when we can't see people. And what we typically get is what we ask for, nothing more. And these are examples of what that looks like, practical examples in the workforce. We're getting exactly what we've asked for, but without any ingenuity or creativity to think through what it needs to be really effective and efficient. What's more important is focusing on relational power and softer tactics. not being soft on expectations, but softer tactics on how we work with individuals, and using empowerment to ensure that we are getting the results that we need, using our business knowledge, our emotional intelligence, and our courage to try to maximize productivity through engagement, using different leadership styles. I know a lot of leaders are exiting the workforce right now because the style that they've grown accustomed to and have been trapped by, and using their authority and inspecting everything doesn't work very well right now. And they're finding they would rather leave than have to make that transition. That transition is going to be very important for those continuing on in the workforce. All right, last piece. Altered workspaces and adapting to rapid change. Lots of change. I think there were 3.4 million people working remotely spring of 2020. And prior to that, there had only been, a fraction of that, working out the small fraction of that. Big changes. The difference is people are feeling and have felt some mental stress. We've heard about that. It's harder to sell or build business unless you're doing it digitally. You can't read cues of people. If there isn't information, silence leaves people to wonder or worry, and people need regular updates. And spontaneous conversation is really difficult to do in the virtual world. As well, conflict can hide, and it really needs to be brought out so people can deal with it. When you're working with teams in the virtual mode, I suggest that you always make sure the purpose is clear. There be agendas, there's abilities, time taken to build relationship and get to know each other fairly well. Make sure that the agenda items are relevant to at least half the people. Track participation. Make sure you bring everybody in. Let quiet attendees or non-attendants know in advance that they are they're valued. It's important for them to be participating. When you're working with individuals, purpose is still important. Expectations, more focused on outcomes, is critical. And structured meeting times, making sure you know when meetings are going to happen, so there's a new normal. And there is genuine concern because people are carrying grief and mental health challenges and a lot of things. You want to build trust by doing what you say you will do. Do what you say you will do, which is what this acrostic stands for. Follow through on commitments that you do make, and that is a really great way to build trust. Listening is important as well. When you have workers that are working from home, as many of you are today make sure you've got proper boundaries. If that means setting up in the garage, by all means do it. Make sure you have a way techniques to minimize the background distractions that you're going to have. Make sure you're aware that ergonomics are vital. You can't be thinking about striding strategically if you've got a sore back. You need good chairs, you need good monitors, and also a good measure of physical activity that translates to something more than eating chips on your exercise ball. The workplace of the future, or maybe it is the workplace of today. This is work from Boston Consulting Group, and I'm going to start to wind down now and open up for some of your questions. But in the future, what is envisioned, there will be a work zone. And I have a number of clients that have either ended their leases, left their leases, got new workspaces, downsized to accommodate many people working from home. They have smaller work zones where people will collaborate together. They'll have a focus zone where people can spend quiet time by themselves. Then there will be collaboration areas where people are looking at where they can work together, large tables or the ability to network virtually. Then there will be some type of cafe for nutrition, wellness zone, a place that people can work out. There's the potential for either branch offices or another place that person feels welcome to do their work. It might even be Starbucks, but supporting people with this other space that they can go to so that they can feel productive. and certainly the home office. That is really what many will be working with, and it's important to gear people for that. This is the face of a future worker. Comes out of a news item last week, Brampton, Ontario. This is MDA space engineer Jessica Marie Zambala. She's looking across the room, waving at her co-worker Susan, who's working in Montreal, but appears to be sitting at the other end of the table in her room using augmented reality and their COVID mask. So this might be what we are looking like not too far down the road. Okay, 7 trends that Ceridian focuses our attention on. Flexible work is here to stay, so we need to strategically think about that. Be aware that we might be out of touch with what the employees' expectations are. We need to ask them. We need to really find out. High productivity could be masking a very exhausted workforce. Don't know that, but evidence suggests that it is the case. Gen Z, who just entered the workforce, they're potentially at risk, possibly disillusioned. They haven't gotten where they expected to go. They may need to be re-energized because it's important. The millennial workforce by 2025 will be 75% of the workforce. So that is us. Okay, not me, but that is us. That's the workforce. Shrinking networks at work are endangering innovation, meaning that people aren't able as easily to connect with people and do that, have that water cooler conversation and really think. So think about innovation. People are working independently a lot. Authenticity will spur productivity and well-being. To be real, to be authentic to ourselves, and accountability, it's really going to be an engine for well-being and productivity. And talent is absolutely everywhere. Big tech is hiring people from everywhere, even Saskatchewan, where the tech industry is doing quite well. We are losing people to the big tech industry. It doesn't matter where you sit. Now, the way forward. We've talked about trends, business life cycles, leadership, and this evolved workforce, changes that have been made, even physically what it's going to look like. I'd like to share, to wrap it up in terms of impacts for strategy. And I liked what Boston Consulting Group did, and I'm going to share you with their plan for the way forward and leave that with you as my suggestion as well. The first one, think about bringing a better reality. Take a really active role in transitioning from an era we all want to forget to one that there is some promise and opportunity. The pandemic isn't behind us, it's an endemic. We need to shift reality, and that won't take place overnight, but create health, safety policies and encourage people to protect themselves, plan for multiple outcomes to account for the complexity of this environment, because it's not very, very simple, but bring about a better reality for your people. Also, determine where work is going to be. Where is it going to get done? What's it look like? Fully on-site, off-site, on-site, primary off-site. Just assess the nature of the work and where it needs to be done. Don't be afraid to test a few things to see what works well, and then support your employees with whatever tools or facilities are required. Think about the technology, what you're going to need for down the road to support crises, critical capabilities, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, digital technology. You need to have the right people and the right technology in place for the future. Focus on customer outcomes. Customers are getting less interested in brands. They're interested more in the ends rather than the means. Shopping shows up on their doorstep right now, and many other things. They're thinking about the ends, not how you get it to them. So be very conscious of that. Win in the talent race. Make sure you're retaining the right people. You are energizing them, you're restoring them, you are attracting the right people. It's going to be vitally important in the future. And also be sure to think about your leadership, the leadership of those within your organization, and make sure they're ready for the challenges that are ahead of us as we continue to regain our strategic stride after COVID. Okay. All right, I'm going to pause now, and I'm going to ask that any of the questions that have emerged, and we'll just open up the lines. Any of the questions, I'm happy to comment on them.
Thank you so much, David. Yes, there are a couple questions for you here. Someone's asked, you mentioned many different reasons for mass resignation, but did not mention the issue of minimum wage. Certainly in the US, this seems to be a factor. What extent is this a similar issue in Canada?
Oh, it is an issue in Canada for sure, and one of the factors in the labor shortage may not be the mass resignation, but is that domestic employment doesn't necessarily care for some of the entry level work, and we just don't have the people for it. And yeah, minimum wage is something that is important. It's a factor in that. It's an important factor for business. It's an important factor for labor, but it's going to continue to be debated, and some level of harmony needs to emerge from that. But it is a factor. I don't have a solution, but yes, it is a factor.
Thank you. Next question is, how costly to business enterprises is this transition to home-based work and productivity versus the social factor of productivity at in-office work?
I would say it's a wash right now. In talking to organizations, I'm hearing that productivity has gone up. It's gone up. Talking to organizations that have call centers right now, they don't have absentee issues. They have no issues with dropped calls, on-time issues. Productivity in general has gone up, so they're quite pleased with that, and they've been able to reduce square footage costs, their operating costs significantly. But people are still wondering about the level of productivity and the ability to influence it. And older leadership styles want to observe and have hands-on and be confirmed, and really see that the productivity is there. That's not necessarily easy to do in the virtual environment. So people are uncomfortable with that. And the styles that are being used in some cases are not being welcomed by employees. So there's their social challenges and their economic challenges. I can't say if one overtakes the other right now, but I know they're both important and they need attention. They really do.
Along the same theme of productivity, Denise is asking, what is the most important tip for a company that is dealing with a need to increase productivity because of dealing with COVID-fatigued employees?
Well, I think it is important to look to a few factors. One, if it's very individual and there's something that can be diagnosed as to support the individual in their level of productivity. If they really are hurting, if they're grieving, if they are not productive, they're distracted, they may need to take advantage of EAP programs. Just EFAP programs through group benefits packages. Make sure your team is getting the support. I would also say that, as we saw from the McKinsey research, people really need to know that they are valued at work. People work predominantly, the main reason people work is because it's meaningful, it's useful, it impacts somebody positively, and they know they're making progress. So if the leaders take the time for people to understand that, yes, it is valuable work, I'm making progress, and there's opportunity for me, that can significantly help move people into the engagement level. In general, Gallup stats suggest that if we have 10 employees, 3 people are fully engaged. 5 people are moderately engaged. They'll do what they're told to do, and 2 people don't want to be there. They don't want to be there. They may be sabotaging. We want to make sure that you have people that are fully engaged and you're able to help them. That's where the productivity comes from. If you are looking at the moderately engaged, you're going to have leaders to tell them to do everything. and they're only going to do what is expected of them and inspected. So try to work towards more engagement.
Thank you. And then this is the last question from Tanya. She's asking if the issue of purpose differs in importance across different generations.
I that is a great question. I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I think that purpose, however, does, if it's personalized, it becomes part of our own journey through humanity. Our purpose when we are at latter parts of our career maybe go beyond our career, and our identity is transitioning into something else. Earlier on in our career, and I think there are statistics suggesting that Gen Z and millennials really find purpose important. They want to make sure that what they're about, their values, are reflected by the organization. They're also reflected by the products and the people that they work with. And it's vitally important there. It may wane later on as people move throughout their state in their career path. It is important. Obviously, purpose is important. We're not going to do things that require a lot of effort or require risk unless it's connected to our purpose and the things that we value.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, David, for joining us from Saskatoon. That's going to conclude our session here. And to let everyone else who's joining us coming back at 11:45, the next topic is on cybersecurity. So you'll just need to go back to your program to find the link to join us there. And hopefully we might see you in person at some point, David. Thanks again.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was a delight. All the best for the rest of the session.